actually like smaller crowds. I do not like public speaking just in general. The small groups, I like the interaction, so I'm just gonna say, like, I'd appreciate if you wanna like ask me a question midstream, put your hand up, whatever. I welcome the interruption. And I didn't really know where to start, because there's so much. Believe it or not, it's been just a year since I've been in this position, so it feels a lot longer, I'll be honest. It's a tough job. There's a lot to do, and there's a lot of ground the county covers. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, but I wanted to let you know what's in front of you. I just brought some handouts, not to go over them all, but just for interest's sake, if you want to, you know, if there's something in there that piques your interest. But one is every year in January I do a year-end review to the chamber breakfast, and that is usually based on council's year state of the county report. So those two kind of go hand in hand. We last year started a new process of putting our budget into an easy 2-pager to understand, so you don't have to go through our big 300-page document. You can, I recommend starting here if you want to look a little bit about that. We just last night and last week had an open house on our capital projects in White Rock on the 10th, and then last night we had one at the chamber. So I brought some of the handouts about our capital projects and specifically our broadband project. And feel free to help yourself. Do you want copies of these, James?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll hand them to you if I'm done.
I'll take one right now.
And then I also took I brought the press release about the outage. I'm sure that's something you're going to want to ask me about, and what's going on with that. So those are just the handouts, and they're just intended to be kind of just informational. They're ones we had on hand, and that's one set of them. There's
Nice.
plenty, and I don't worry about waste. I'm going to take these back to the office and reuse them at another meeting as well, so they won't go into the trash. I chose to go low tech because of the outage. I just figured, I'm just going to go with paper. A little bit about me. I did move to Los Alamos in 2009. I am an architect. I have 2 children. My husband's an attorney, also a historic preservationist. We sort of really enjoyed, going around the Southwest. We met in Arizona. I heard you talking about, he's a Sparty. Talking about Arizona, we met there, and he's from Michigan. We spent some 9 years out there. So we've lived in different parts of the country. And, when this job came up to be capital projects and facilities director back in 2008, I read the job description. I'm like, we got to go. We also got engaged in the Sandia Mountains and had that dinner that night at Gabriel's. So it was also kind of nostalgic to come back to New Mexico as well. But since that time, one of the reasons I even though I'm an architect, I got into public service and public projects. And that happened because even when I was in private sector, I was doing school bond projects and renovations to K-12 projects. I was doing transit projects. That's where I had to learn and do all the compliance with Buy America and federal funding requirements. And then I ended up getting hired by the Transit Authority. I had 2 little tiny kids. They were 16 months apart, and it was my opportunity not to have to travel for work. And I took it. And I was their facility manager, helped them get acclimated to their new buildings that they had built in Grand Rapids. And then it just got really hard to do it all. So I took a step back, and it lasted 6 months before I moved here and took this job as capital projects and facility. But again, in addition to New Mexico being fabulous, the history of Los Alamos, in addition to all that, it was really an opportunity for me to do what I love, which is work on buildings, work in public service, and really be part of the community that I serve. And that's what drove me as an architect was, buildings that had purpose or served a purpose. It really wasn't about wanting to build a monument to myself as in my basement. I really wanted the interaction and the public engagement. So that's what led me to this. Well, fast forward, things happen in government, as you know, and we had some really lean years. And I remember we were in the middle of budget hearings, and I got a call before. We had a late night of budget hearings. It was the next morning. I got a call from our new manager, Harry Burgess, and he's like, Ann, council doesn't think I made enough cuts in the budget. The community development director is retired. Will you merge your department with that one to create some efficiency? And I said, okay, sure. And so that's how I became community development director. I had the background for it. I had been a user. I had taken plans for customers through the planning and building departments. I knew how to read code. I knew how to write code sheets. I knew how to argue with building inspectors about what was or wasn't compliant. And so that's what I brought for 4 years. And then I got an opportunity to go to Park City, Utah for 4 years. And I'll be honest, it was the skiing. It just kind of like called to us that we wanted to ski more. And it was great, but I really miss Los Alamos. And this is true. I found myself saying, we don't have a senior management team like we do in Los Alamos. We don't have counselors that work in a way that they do in Los Alamos, and a community that's engaged in the same way. It's much, much different. And every organization's a little bit different. There's gonna be pros and cons, you could argue, but I will tell you, I came back because I miss Los Alamos and I miss the organization I worked for. So when I got that opportunity to come back, I jumped at it. It was also great to get my kids back in the public schools before they graduated so they could be toppers before they went off to college or the Air Force. So that's about me, and I also went back in my 40s and got my Master's of Public Administration. It became clear to me I wasn't going to go back into private sector, and so I did make that move to go back and get my Master's of Public Administration, primarily because I wanted more tools in the toolbox. I believe in continual learning, always being better at what you do, and so I try to model that, and I'm not shy away from always learning something new or trying to push ourselves. And the reality of what we do is we're not going to be able to shed our future, but we can look till tomorrow, and that's really where we need to be focused, is what we're doing today and forward. So with that, I brought you all these handouts. I'm going to ask for like 3 to 5 topics you want me to cover, and I will, yes.
Quick question. I'd like to know the reason for the outage yesterday.
Okay.
Second question is, tell me the status of the MRA.
Okay.
And as a member of the public, it kind of feels like Columbus Capital has narrowed that whole region in for redevelopment. And I don't feel like things are completely transparent on how that's being pushed forward and by whom and deadlines and so forth.
Happy to talk about that. Okay, so I got 2. Outage, MRA, yes.
Less tactical, more strategic. 3 biggest challenges you think we face, and given the structure of state, county, local budgets, accounting, et cetera, fund accounting, everything that works at that state and local level. Things that those 3, the ones you think you'll be able to address, may have challenges addressing, won't be able to address.
Okay, so 3 biggest challenges to budgeting?
No, just 3 biggest challenges.
To the job?
Yes.
Okay.
And then whether or not you think they can be addressed.
Okay.
And how. Okay.
Can I ask for one bonus topic?
No,
Affordable housing?
Affordable housing?
Oh, 5. Okay, cool.
I'm good.
So I'd like to add, when you talk about the outage, what the county's doing to prevent that, and particularly what was so troublesome about both outages were their single point failures in the entire communication system.
Yeah.
I mean, landlines don't work, cell phones don't work, internet doesn't work. This is a huge public, potential disaster in case there was a real emergency where people needed to be contacted.
And not just 2, 3. They did the same thing months ago, remember? And water rolls in, same bodies, doing the same work, making the same mistake. So 4 issues.
Good, okay.
I'm sorry, you lost me on it happened a 3rd time months ago.
We had one the 11th, we had one yesterday, the 17th, and prior to that, we had all comms go down sometime in the past 6, 8 months. I could double
I
check.
think it was like 22?
I think it was
2022?
December 23.
23.
Was it?
Or 22. No, it might have been December 22, right? It was 22 or 23, December. Okay,
Okay,
now I know what you're talking
gotcha.
about. Okay.
What was disconcerting that I just let him a second is that it was important, it was no promise that this would not happen again. So that
There you
gets
go.
to Kurt's point.
Yep.
Also, the hospital couldn't deal with patients, appointments, which shocked me. I thought they would have an emergency.
So when people were calling, they were saying, sorry, we can't schedule
Well,
you right now?
I came in for an appointment and they couldn't deal with me.
Oh,
You
they said
can
sorry
call.
about that people to process you.
Yeah, it's just because you're hard to deal with.
Oh, thanks.
Well, of course, that would happen because it happens suddenly, there's no preparation.
Right.
It's like if one knew, oh, in about 3 hours, we'll turn something off.
Yep.
But when things happen suddenly, there's no preparation.
That's right at 8 o'clock.
On the topic, deja vu, I have a question. One thing I wanted to ask was about the maintenance of our facilities and the maintenance of our roads. And I think as a county in general, we do an outstanding job with everything that we manage. I mean, we manage so many different things. So I was just curious about your take about the maintenance of the facilities and some of the recreational facilities that we have.
Okay.
Did you get all that?
I think I did. I'm trying to figure out where I want to start. Do I want to start with the hard one first, or do I want to end on the hard one?
I think the outage, everybody is like concerned about the
Yeah,
outage.
yeah. Okay, I'll tell you about the outage, and I'm gonna ask you to be patient with me because it really is, there's multiple players in this situation. And I just want to acknowledge first that absolutely I understand that it affects everybody, including us. We all, are frustrated when this happens, and it's not good. So I'm gonna say that first, and it's not being viewed and taken lightly by anybody at this point. So, there is a press release. I'm not gonna get it 100% right, but we have a Board of Public Utilities who reports to the utility manager, and this was a utility project. It's a project that's been delayed, but it is critical for us being able for water to serve White Rock. And so we've been trying to hold off to do this project when State Route 4, by the state, because this section of State Route 4 is not in the county, it's actually outside county boundaries. It's actually a DOT state road, and it's an easement through Pueblo property. And so we're restricted by what we can do in it. And so we were holding off on this very critical project until we were working with the state to get State Route 4 rebuilt and widened with better shoulders, because there's been bicycle accidents, and we've been pushing really hard at the state level to get funded an improvement so we can have at least a better shoulder for bicycles who are daring enough to ride down there. We do not have enough right-of-way from the Pueblo, nor are they agreeable to widening the current right-of-way that we have for the road. We would love it if there was more, but that's not on the table for discussion according to the Pueblo. So from there, they started the project. They had a company, they being the DOT, Department of Transportation, were doing the clearances for environmental for the project. And they got to the end and it wasn't done properly. The environmental contractors was fired. They could not put it out to bid because the environmental wasn't cleared or approved. And the funding for that reconstruction went up to the Four Corners area. And we're still trying to get that funding back. So thank you for bearing with me in the history.
When did that happen?
Oh, that's happened over the last 5 years.
Okay, I'm just looking back, because I dumped
Yeah.
millions to the state, US taxpayer dollars directly out of DOE. And our mindset has been, the whole reason for widening that is so that you can get the trucks with the true waste off the hill more safely. And I will go back and talk to 2 people in the office and make sure the money we send is still with the state.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, and we would love it to be more lanes as well, but we were not that, we would need more right-of-way from the Pueblo to San Ildefonso to be able to do that. So I'm setting the stage for that. So it got to a point where we couldn't wait anymore to do the water line project for that DOT project. And it was like, utilities is like, we gotta move forward, we're gonna hit a critical water issue, being able to provide our residents in White Rock with water service. Okay, so we bid. So the way that the county works with those is we bid it, and we get a contractor. And it is, from all that we know, this is a good contractor, but every contractor is only as good as their employees, and all it takes is one employee making a mistake that causes a big issue. All right, I'm gonna flip a little bit. The utilities department is allowed to work in the right-of-way because they have an easement from the Pueblo to San Ildefonso. That easement only allows us to put in a water line. We were not allowed even to put in as part of this project, our own conduit to put in our own fiber. We would have loved to do that and have a county fiber line that ran down that same trench. Makes sense, right? You open a trench, you want to do it all at once, you don't want to have to do it again. But, good news, in our conversations with the Pueblo de San Ildefonso, we talked to them and we've been supporting them in what's called the Middle Mile Broadband Project. And they went after a grant, and they got grant money, but they could only do the broadband that kind of served their Pueblo area. And they have an arm of the Pueblo called the San Ildefonso Services, and they call it for economic development. Their job is to make money for the tribe. And they said, if we need additional grant money, we can run a fiber all the way from the Poake High School to White Rock. And that we will then sell you that redundant service. So then so the county actually and the council approved $2 million grant match money, so they could get about $4 million from the state to do that additional leg of their project that they had other funding to do. And in addition to that, we then, because we couldn't put in our own fiber, or they wouldn't even let us put in conduit, we did coordinate our contract with San I Services, and they are putting in for them and charging San I Services their conduit for a new fiber line that runs down there. So I just want to give you an idea of all the players. Okay, throw in there, then we've got Lumen. And Lumen, don't ask me what the connections are between Lumen, Comcast, and Xfinity. I don't know, they're related, but they're different. That's all I know. But it's being called a Lumen line of fiber that runs right where our water line is. What I heard is that from the people who looked at the fiber, they said it's 1980s vintage fiber, because you can look at the fiber and actually tell what vintage of the type of fiber they manufactured. We thought for sure it was 90s or early 2000s. We had no idea it was that old. That means it's 40-year-old fiber. So I will tell you, you are absolutely correct to be concerned that our connectivity as a community is reliant on one fiber line that's 40 years old, and it's direct buried. It's not even in a conduit. It's just a cable sitting in the ground in a channel. So you're absolutely correct to say that's not good for us. And so that's why we're working, and we've known this. We didn't really know the vintage of Lumen. We didn't really know, and we certainly don't think we should be hitting it as part of this project. But that's why we're doing this broadband project, is because we've known as a county for a long time that the people who are providing service here aren't investing in replacing their infrastructure. And part of the broadband project came from the citizens who said, I am unhappy with my Comcast service or whatever, and I don't mean to pick them out, but that's what we've heard. And so that's why we started this broadband project, where we're gonna put in new fiber to every home, and why could council put $2 million towards San Ildefonso so they could put in a second line. And the county's plan is to have service on both. So if one goes down, we'll have another. And it really should be in conduit, it should have tracer wire, and it needs to be located properly. So the contractor, when they start doing their work, they call for locates, and it is Lumen's responsibility to come locate them. And then that's what they're going on based on when they dig. However, given what has happened, what we're talking about is we are in the process of asking Lumen to be there on site and to help us not hit their line, because the locates are not cutting it, and that's what happened to the second. We made sure it was all located after the first one. We double, triple checked everything. Everybody said we're gonna go, and then what happened is the tracer wire ran straight, and there's a section where I don't know if somebody dug or if there was some disturbance, but somehow the fiber line was no longer next to the tracer wire, and that's what happened yesterday. So we think that Lumen needs to be on site and really be out ahead of the contractor and be because they were potholing and doing all the right things, but they need to be potholing and they need to be helping us not hit their line. I will tell you that the PRC is the regulatory commission that manages and oversees not hitting those underground. They were on site yesterday. We don't have the report yet, but we're assuming that they're going to come out with some sort of report of what went wrong and who's responsible, and potentially issuing fines. So I don't know if that helps, but that's at least what I know about it, and we're taking it very seriously, and it's not good. So.
Does the whole line have to be installed before any section of the new line can be activated?
When you say line, which line are you talking about? The water line or the new broadband line?
The broadband
Okay.
line.
So the only thing that's going in right now with the project is a new conduit, which then the Pueblo de San Ildefonso, with the grant money that the county's providing them grant match dollars for, they'll have to come back and then pull their wire through. I don't know what their timeline is on that, of when they'll pull that through and when they'll light it up and activate it.
Is that part of the broadband plan, the middle mile section, the Sanai section, I guess?
It's part of the county's plan in that we know we need it to be successful, is to have a second mile. That's why we put funding towards what we did for the middle mile. But the Pueblo was very insistent. They didn't want the county to own it. They look at it as an economic development. They want us to be a customer to them, so we will be a service. We will be buying service. And so yes, that is a component of what will serve the community broadband. But in order to really be redundant, we will still be buying service on the Lumen line. Now, we hope there's another line someday that in addition to that, and we are hoping that this really awakens Lumen a little bit to the fact of how old and vulnerable their infrastructure is. Yeah.
So the thing that confuses me is, I understand you cut a line, the internet goes down, cell phone service went down. So the cell phone is tied to the internet. However, the 911 didn't go down, so there's some type of backup microwave communication going on.
Right.
We're not in an actual cell here then. So we're our own cell, completely tied to the rest of the world through the internet. But we do have backup microwave, but that doesn't have the bandwidth to actually be a backup.
Correct.
Is there anybody talking about having a backup that's actually a backup?
Okay. I will tell you what I know. The way I understand it works is the reason cell phone goes down is because that fiber goes up to the cell tower. So when that fiber was cut, it killed that cell phone tower.
Yeah.
So where, like at PCS, we have a Starlink for our utilities guys, they were able to have access because they had a Starlink. Our PD has Starlink. They also have radar. Our public Wi-Fi was working, but it got overloaded. We have a microwave tower on the county building, but we found our fail-safe didn't work. We had a firewall issue. We upgraded or changed our firewall. There's some component, and even though we thought we had tested it, when we went to go use it for the county operations day-to-day, we couldn't use our internal wireless, and so we were using public, and we were further bringing down that. For 911, if you're dialing 911, that goes to satellite. So that's why 911 works. So when you see on your phone SOS and you dial 911, it will not work though for dialing your friend. It'll only work for dialing for emergency. So that's how that works.
So the only backup we have is satellite.
Right now, yes.
So, question. I know there's a lot of conversation with the state, with the Pueblos. I think I know the answer to this because I think I know the culture. But has there, to your knowledge, time you've been here, been conversation directly with the federal government, skip Albuquerque, Washington, D.C., the national laboratories and the like? The way I'm thinking is, if the laboratory is that important to national security, I'm just wondering, and I've seen this in a couple of places, why there isn't a national security exemption and why they can't, not eminent domain, but close enough, tell the Pueblo, so sad, too bad, we're installing this. Now, if we want to concur, come to agreement on what we will give you as compensation for data and other stuff running through here, we'll discuss that. But no, you're a much larger nation. Yes, we're gonna bully you around on this and we're gonna get this right.
Okay. I will tell you, I'm not an attorney. I will tell you that tribals are sovereign nations and they're not subject to federal government. They are their own federal government.
Now, I get that, but I also know practical application where we have gone in, just like we took people's property from them and compensated them in what is now Oak Ridge, Tennessee. The entire space or area of the Tennessee Valley Authority, the water, that's the other things like that. They're, okay, you answered.
Yeah, but I will answer the other part of what I know is, you might have heard the term like a third transmission line. my understanding is there will, you know, if that, and that's what, and I've heard the laboratory really push on the criticality of having that third transmission line for utility, for electric.
Yep.
But that also has it is also planned to have a fiber on it.
Correct.
So I absolutely
You're talking
anticipate,
EPC and?
I don't know what that,
Okay.
I just mean the one that goes down the Kanya,
Okay.
I just want to say, I think for a long time, you know, the county's been very reliant on a single line
Yeah.
for internet. And I'm so happy to hear that, you know, the council has been steadfastly supporting having a second line, working with the Pueblos. And it seems as though the project that's going on now through the easement is going to install another conduit. Now, that's going to be done through working in cooperation with the Pueblos, which is a necessity for something like this. But if we can make that happen where the county has 2 lines instead of 1 for internet, I think that would be, you know, tremendous. And the county is working to do that.
Well,
So,
and I want to compliment the state. You asked about the state. I want to compliment the state. They made the bold move that said that broadband and access to fiber is a basic utility. And they're allowing us to use our, you know, that's what really enabled all these grants to be given out. And also for us to be able to not have the industry come quash us and say, as a municipality, you can't be in this business. It's allowing us to actually create the infrastructure for our community, whereas, you know, how lobbyists work and, you know, all those types of things. I don't think without the actions of the state, it would be as easy to do, so.
you know, one other question I wanted to ask about the older infrastructure. So we have the internet cable that's running along the easement there. And this cable is like 40 years old, I think you were saying. There's indication that it's, you know, the fiber cable is 40 years old. And so it doesn't seem to me that there may have been complete records at the time that was put in of exactly where it was. And also even it may deviate somewhat from the tracer path. And so that could be a contributor, I think, to some of the problems that we're having, that we're inadvertently hitting this line when we're out there trying to do work, because there isn't really a complete record of where it is. Is that fair to say that?
I think it's very accurate, but I think, you know, where I'm coming at it from a community perspective, and I don't want to come across as trying to blame, that, you know, it is our contractor, it was our utility company's water line contractor, so I'm not saying that, and I do think it really highlights for us what we did know. It's just a lot older than fiber than we even knew, but we did know that they are not investing in this, and so I do think it's important that you just don't have old infrastructure and expect it to work, right? Like, you've got to give it some TLC and you got to check it, and that this is the situation we're in, so it's become critical.
So what is Lumen's response to this? Have they said anything? Do they have any responsibility in this, or?
Absolutely. So when it's your utility in a public right of way, you are required by law to locate it, and if you don't locate it properly and it gets hit, it's their fault. They gotta, you know, they're responsible. If it's located properly, the contractor hits it, it's the contractor's responsibility. That's how it works.
Okay, but I meant more, do they understand that they need to do something about this, or?
Yes, that's why I think, especially with the PRC coming out yesterday, and they might be issuing fines, or we don't know, they do understand, absolutely. They understand that it took the entire community down.
Twice in a week.
Has there been any talk of increasing Starlink capability, just as an immediate response to this issue?
At this point, you know, the county took our recreation Starlink, we put it on top of the community building to increase the capacity of the pond. You know, but it really is something that we can't buy it for private entities, so not at this point. But I would also say, like, this is just a fair warning, Starlink also has capacity, so the reason why fiber is great is it's the only method where you can actually sign certain capacities and guarantee it. Anytime you do wireless or when you do Starlink, you can buy a certain capacity, but that's only if it's available, and I don't necessarily know how that's all prioritized as well. But the county has certainly looked at it and has purchased a few. The nice thing about it is you can turn it off and on as you need it. You just need internet to turn it on. so.
I don't wanna step on your toes, but 25, almost 30 years ago, I think, I was involved in a project that was both downtown Los Alamos and White Rock when they had that new place land, but they hadn't put houses on it. They had different developments starting down there, and they wanted Wi-Fi for those areas. And at that time, the county council quashed it. Satellite's gonna be everywhere. We don't need to do things like that. And I think that one decision right there is what slowed us down the last 30 years.
How long ago was that about?
About 25, 30 years ago, I don't remember exactly. I was
Okay.
working for a company that was putting bids on the A9 track.
Okay, A19 down in Margaret?
A19, yeah.
Okay.
Which turned out to be something different. And then they also, somebody threw me over to the county to talk about doing downtown Wi-Fi. Just open public spaces Wi-Fi. So I went out and showed them how to do it, but at that time, somebody in the county council came in and said, we're gonna have satellite everywhere, and we won't need it.
Yeah.
It's a waste of money.
You know, the only history I have on it is when I was here last time, I wanna say it was probably 12 years ago. 2012, 13 years ago. There was a broadband study, that was the first broadband community-wide study that was done, and the price at that point was 60 million. It came in, and council didn't say that they didn't wanna do it, they just basically said we can't afford to do it. This is one of the rare times I can say this, like our current contract with our broadband vendor is, around 30 million. So it's one of the few places where the price came down over the years, strangely enough. But it doesn't mean that there may not be wireless components at some point. For the most part, we're
No,
trying to
I'm
provide
just saying,
fiber
I
to the
think
home.
that
Yeah.
that was the thing, that's why we have a 40-year-old, people, they just dropped the ball on it. And so that just kind of got put to the wayside, and my feeling, it's just a feeling, is that it was pervasive for a while, that satellite will come in, we don't need to worry about these fiber cables, just throw them in a trench, get them up here. It'll all be, in 20 years, it'll be all using satellite.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, the county did not install that. That's a private entity's
Yeah.
fiber. Okay.
But nobody stayed on top of it, quite obviously.
Okay, the bigger things,
What was the next topic?
I'm guessing.
Got 10 minutes. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to talk fast.
Housing.
Housing.
Affordable housing.
Tim, you had something.
The MRA.
MRA housing,
yes.
and then the hard part.
Big three, and your
The
big three could
Okay.
be what you just talked about, housing and something else.
Okay, housing, I highly encourage you to read our 2024 affordable housing plan, it's very good. It really paints a picture of our housing needs, and what we've done is defined affordability in terms of, let me back up. In state of New Mexico, there's a thing called anti-donation, so public dollars are limited on what they can use in the private sector. Affordable housing is one of the few things that's exempt from anti-donation. And so what the county's doing based on that plan is we've got several properties that we're trying to make available, and we're trying to make our contribution result in affordable housing. And we're also trying to partner those with federal funding. LIHTC is a term you'll use. It's what was funding the Canyon Walk apartments on DP Road, low income tax credit. What that does is the federal government gives tax credits to the developer that they can then sell, and they use that revenue to fund the project, and in exchange for that, they have to be affordable for a period of 15 years.
Don't the numbers have to make sense by
Yes.
themselves? I mean, the last plan that I looked at for the MRA, I calculated the square footage price in the mid-400s, which seemed like it was really high.
So hold that thought on the MRA. I'm doing affordable housing. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Okay, okay.
I'm gonna do MRA next. So this is just affordable housing, and affordable housing means that is housing that's affordable to a certain area, median income, or AMI. And
So that differs depending on where you are. It's different in New York City and San Fran than it is.
So
Okay.
by having our own plan, we're defining it for our region. Otherwise, you have to go based on HUD numbers. And with our income being so high and everything else, we wanted it to be higher. So we, through our plan, defined affordability, and it's very difficult to own or rent a house all the way up to 120% area median income, believe it or not, so over 100. And I always like using rough numbers. if you just use a 100% area median income as 100,000, it's easy to think about 120. It's actually above 100 a little bit, but for round numbers, it's easy to contemplate in that way for someone like me who doesn't do math in their head. And then what you can afford is usually around 30% of what you make, including utilities. So if you look at a rent or a mortgage and your utility costs, general rule of thumb is it shouldn't be more than 30%. Otherwise, you're what's called house burdened, meaning that you're overburdened on your cost of living. And so there are many things we're trying to do, either deed restrictions or basically working with developers to buy down some of the costs and partnering on some of those things to create affordable housing. But Tim, you're right. At the end of the day, no matter how it all works out, if it's a public-private developer partnership, it still has to make sense to the developer. They're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. It still has to be a project that they think they're not going to lose money on, or that somehow their risk is worth it. Because development is risky, it really is. And so we have a few projects coming forward, 20th Street, south of the pond. We have A8A, which is a little mesa that goes south from the Bluffs Apartments on DP Road that's never been built on. North Mesa, we're looking at infrastructure improvements to this middle school's property. They might want to develop that for like teacher housing and some other aspects. And then we're also looking at a project where it's buying a deed restriction on existing units. There's a new buyer for some units, and they've asked for our contribution to keep those, and their return is they'll keep them affordable rents for 40 years for the people who qualify to be in those rents. So that's kind of what we're doing. But I will say that affordable housing is one of the main things I think the county can do to help local businesses, because I think it's really hard to get people to work in local businesses who can't afford to live here. And I think that piece of it is something where we have a lot of tools in place to be as helpful as we can, and council has set aside monies to put towards those projects. They do take time, but the one that we're most concerned about right now is the Hills. We're not building it, but we really want to get them open, but they just have some contractor issues, so to get them done.
So,
Did I answer all your questions?
I'm really interested on the supply side strategies. So bringing down that cost per square foot, or, reducing the time it takes to build, all of the, just building more housing as opposed to strong arming, deed restrictions and things like that.
Yep. No, and I think panelizing and being able to manufacture part of the development offsite, bringing them in, so all you're doing is the underground work and then the rest of it goes up quickly, is all really good. I will tell you, one of the things we're really challenged on is if we had the land to do a field of just pre-manufactured homes that we could come truck in, that would be great. That's just not high enough density, and so we are looking at higher densities just because of our lack of land.
I thought you had a good point moments ago on people who can afford to live up here. Those are the people who maybe you've seen Smiths and work in various locations, but I do know that a lot of people come up from the valley, and it's worth the drive up because the wages are greater here than they are down here. So I will argue with the assumption we need to put more people here, whether it's Manhattan, Hawaiian Islands, inside passage of Alaska, whatnot. I mean, in similar sense, we're restricted by what we can put up here. And I would question that we need to put more people up here, particularly where we have a great number of people coming up here. There may be three things we could talk through after this meeting, so I don't hold people up, but I'm just wondering, what's the basis for that assumption that we have to have more people up here? Is it in support of property tax revenue? Is it in support of we need to fill the schools we have? What's the reason behind putting more people in a limited space?
A lot of reasons, but it is, if you look at our surveys, we have a lot of data in our surveys to support that there are people who want to live here if they could. Not everybody, but we know it's not everybody. We know from small businesses that they're struggling with workforce. We know from the schools that they're struggling. And we know from our own police and fire, public safety folks, a lot of them just can't afford. Yeah.
Any thought about,
And they love our public schools, so that's the other thing, is if they have kids, they really would love to be able to be here in our schools.
and as far as housing that's focused on, I know this doesn't help by going vertical because it's one level, but homes that you can transition older people, retirees and older people into, which frees up the big homes that are no longer filled with 5, 6 people.
All of that.
Okay,
All of that is our strategies. Affordable housing is not our affordable housing manager is, there's no silver bullet. You gotta kinda use a shotgun and just kinda cast a wide net of trying it all. But, the other one is ADUs. We're gonna be talking about accessible dwelling units and, the county can certainly be enabling, but there are some challenges to that, which is we have some small lots already. We have fire concerns and we have HOAs that the county we don't enforce their rules, we also don't supersede their rules, so. Okay, MRA, sorry, don't wanna give you the short end of the stick. MRA, I agree with you, it hasn't been well communicated, it's not well understood, and it's leaving people with a lot of questions, and I have some of those same questions. So I'm gonna be going to council to kind of do a presentation and update.
When will that be?
Right now it's the 25th, but that agenda's getting really booked, so it may get pushed to the 8th of April, but one of those meetings, keep an eye on the agenda.
Is there a primary point person for Columbus Capital dealing with the city?
They have, I was temporarily when when we lost our economic development administrator, and we got a new one, but has been focused on other things, so I kept that point of contact for a while, but I haven't heard from him in months. He just doesn't have anything that he wants to propose or ask at the moment. He's struggling with, just financing. Last I knew last year, he was waiting for interest rates to come down. At one point, they thought he would come down 4 times, they came down once. And then I know he was looking at sort of what you mentioned, James, he was looking at alternative construction methods that might bring down some of the
You're
costs.
talking about Jeff Branch.
Excuse my ignorance, what's MRA?
Okay, Metropolitan Redevelopment Area.
Okay.
So the council approved one in White Rock, which is the Longview area, and they approved the boundary, but not the plan yet, of a second area, which is basically where the Knights of Columbus are, Merrimack, Hilltop, and then the apartments that are to the north of Central Ave. And I think there might be one other property across like the old automotive place, I think, on the other side of DP Road from Columbus Capital. I think that's all it entails. The idea of a metropolitan redevelopment area is an area that that it's connected with our the state Main Street program. You can define an area that has blight, and blight is a combination of vacancies, deteriorating property, and I forget what the third one is, but there's some criteria, and so the state MRA had hired a consultant to come do that evaluation, and these are the 2 areas they said qualified. The problem with this one up here is everything you just said, Tim, and that is that the majority of it is all under one ownership. The way that I've seen MRAs really work, and Farmington has a really good website, they combine it with their own capital projects, and they use it as a basis for, we're gonna do this road improvement, this street improvement, we're gonna do these things, or facade improvements in this area, but they're usually much bigger, and it's usually to spur and help new businesses, and it's with the intention of getting more taxes back. It's an economic development tool. The other thing you can use it for is the basis for creating a tax district. So I always like it, so if we were to get a mini Target or something coming in there, we would, with the MRA in place, there's the tax revenues in the district. With the new development, you capture that money, and the government says, we're gonna put that money back into that area for the streetscapes, for hanging pots, for, whatever they need to make that place and beautify it and do all these nice public amenities. But again, we don't have that, right? As far as I know, Columbus Capital hasn't come to the county and said, I have an anchor tenant ready to go, or anything like that. So I'm more interested at this point, well, I know for White Rock, what we're looking for is we're really looking to create a project to realign Longview, so it goes straight through, and the MRA allows us to do as a basis for that transaction. It's complicated land ownership down in Longview. There's multiple buildings, but then common land, and it's been really difficult for us to untangle any of that over these years to make it, but we think we've got a good path forward on that. And then I would say for the MRA up here, the county has a project in out years that will improve, Central Ave from Ninth Street, or from the roundabout to Ninth Street. We're just waiting for Columbus Capital to come up with their plans so we can coordinate the curb cuts and all those good things. So those are the kind of projects we're planning on anyway. So, there are some other things, MRAs you could do. You could, waive development fees, we could help with demolition, we could do some other things. But at this point, it's undefined what that is. So if we're gonna move forward with an MRA, we need council and the public to help us define that a little bit better so people know what it is, know what our intentions are, and don't think we're up to backdoor deals, because I guarantee we're not doing backdoor deals. I can show you our IPRA responses that we do that prove that.
When do you need to be back in the office?
I'm okay.
Okay, so here's what I'm getting at. We're gonna have everyone stand up. We'll do the four-way test. That way people who wanna leave can leave.